Imagine standing on the battlefield, your enemies closing in, yet you feel no fear. You have been promised by fate itself that you are invincible. The witches told you, Macbeth shall never vanquished be, until great Birnam Wood to high Dunsinane Hill shall come against him. Who would ever believe that a forest could move? Trees don't march, woods don't attack. So Macbeth, once a noble warrior turned ruthless tyrant, clings to this prophecy as his shield. But what happens when the impossible becomes reality? When Birnam Forest itself seems to rise and advance toward his castle. This strange vision is one of Shakespeare's most haunting creations, but it also raises a deeper question. Why do forests so often appear in literature, myth, and folklore as messengers of fate and harbingers of doom? In today's journey, we'll unravel the enigma of Birnam Wood, explore how Shakespeare transformed a simple strategy of war into a chilling prophecy, and connect this mysterious forest in disguise to centuries of mythological and cultural traditions that saw forests as living, breathing agents of destiny. Stay with us, because this is not just the story of Macbeth, but of forests that walk, whisper, and even kill. 1-5. Macbeth's Prophecy and the Birth of the Forest Enigma. At the heart of Shakespeare's tragedy, Macbeth lies a prophecy that seems impossible, almost laughable at first. The three witches, those eerie voices of fate, tell Macbeth that he cannot be defeated until Birnam Wood comes to Dunsinane Castle. To Macbeth, this sounds like a guarantee of immortality. After all, how could a forest, an entire stretch of trees, roots, and earth, uproot itself and march toward a fortress? The prophecy comforts him, feeding his arrogance and his sense of invincibility. But here lies Shakespeare's genius. The prophecy is not a lie, it's a riddle. As Macbeth's enemies close in, they cut branches from Birnam Forest and use them as camouflage, creating the illusion of an advancing wood. To Macbeth, watching from his castle, it seems as though the forest itself has come alive and is fulfilling the witch's terrifying vision. This scene is more than clever wordplay. It symbolizes Macbeth's downfall, the very moment his false sense of security crumbles. What he thought was impossible turns out to be a trap of language, a reminder that fate often works in ways that mortals fail to anticipate. And so, Birnam Wood becomes more than just a setting in the play. It becomes an omen, a character in its own right, a silent executioner that brings Macbeth's reign to its end. Worker 1-5. Forests as symbols of fate and fear. Forests have always held a powerful place in the human imagination. They are not just clusters of trees. They are mysterious realms where light and shadow intertwine, where danger and transformation often wait. In myths, legends, and folklore across cultures, forests frequently act as thresholds between the known and the unknown, the human world and something far more dangerous. In the Middle Ages, people feared the forest as much as they revered it. Forests stretched wide, dark and untamed, filled with wolves, bandits, and spirits believed to haunt the wild. To step into the woods was to step into uncertainty, where fate itself might shift. That is why Shakespeare's prophecy of Birnam Wood resonated so deeply. It wasn't just the clever trick of soldiers carrying branches. It was the idea of the forest itself acting as an omen, an unstoppable force of nature that no man could control. In Celtic mythology, forests often appear as enchanted places where heroes are tested, sometimes rewarded with wisdom, sometimes destroyed by hubris. In Norse sagas, dark woods were home to trolls and giants, creatures that embodied chaos and death. Even in the Christian imagination, forests often symbolize temptation, sin, and the lurking presence of the devil. Thus, Macbeth's vision of a moving forest wasn't just shocking, it tapped into centuries of symbolic fear. A forest wasn't just a backdrop. It was alive, unpredictable, and capable of delivering justice in its own eerie way. 1.5. Shakespeare's genius, the forest as Macbeth's mirror. When Shakespeare gave us the image of Birnam Wood advancing on Dunsinane, he wasn't only creating suspense for the audience, he was also holding up a mirror to Macbeth's crumbling soul. Throughout the play, Macbeth loses his grip on reality, consumed by paranoia and haunted by guilt. The witch's words feed his ambition, but they also warp his perception. He clings to the prophecy because it reassures him that he is untouchable, even as he feels the walls of his world closing in. The advancing forest becomes the perfect symbol of this unraveling. It represents inevitability, the slow march of fate that he cannot escape. Just as the branches move closer and closer, so too does Macbeth's doom. There's also irony at work. Macbeth was once a brave warrior, a man who relied on courage and steel. Yet, in the end, it is not swords that break him, but the fulfillment of a riddle. The prophecy, which he misunderstood, becomes the weapon that kills his confidence. To the Elizabethan audience, this was a brilliant twist. Nature itself seemed to rise up against a tyrant who had upset the natural order by murdering his king. The forest, in disguise, wasn't merely camouflage for soldiers. It was the world correcting itself, restoring balance by striking down a man who had tried to defy fate. Number 1.5. Moving forests in myth and legend, Shakespeare's Birnam Wood may be the most famous forest in disguise, but it is far from unique. Across the world's traditions, forests often act as supernatural forces, capable of moving, warning, or even punishing. In Celtic folklore, enchanted groves were said to shift and transform, trapping wanderers in endless circles. Heroes entering such forests often faced trials of courage or wisdom. The woods could appear welcoming one moment and hostile the next, reminding listeners that nature itself could be unpredictable and alive. In Norse mythology, the great world tree Yggdrasil connects the realms of gods, humans, and giants. While not a moving forest in the literal sense, it embodies the idea that trees and woods hold cosmic power over life, death, and destiny. Even in biblical tradition, forests could carry divine messages. In the book of Isaiah, forests are described as instruments of God's wrath, toppling kings and kingdoms. To ancient audiences, the forest was never silent. It could whisper, warn, and judge. So when Shakespeare presented the vision of Birnam Wood advancing, his audience would have immediately understood the weight of this imagery. It wasn't just a clever trick of warfare. It was the fulfillment of a cosmic warning, the natural world itself rising up to destroy a usurper. In this way, Macbeth's downfall becomes part of a much older and wider story, the tale of how forests, whether real or imagined, have always been bound to fate and prophecy. 1.5. Forest as a weapon, real-life battle tactics. The moving forest in Macbeth may sound like pure fantasy, but history tells us otherwise. Armies have long used forests, branches, and camouflage as tools of war. In medieval and ancient battles, soldiers often cut down trees or branches to disguise their numbers. By carrying branches in front of them, they could appear as part of the natural landscape, only to reveal themselves suddenly when close to enemy lines. This tactic created shock, confusion, and fear, much like the terror Macbeth feels when he realizes Birnam Wood is on the move. One famous example comes from the Battle of Agincourt in 1415, where English archers hid within woodland cover using nature itself as a shield. Similarly, in Roman times, ambushes were often staged from dense forests, where armies seemed to emerge from the trees. Shakespeare may have been inspired by accounts of such tactics, blending real strategy with supernatural prophecy. For his audience, the advancing forest was not only a mystical omen but also a believable image of war itself, a reminder that armies could use disguise as effectively as swords. The power of the forest in disguise, then, lies in its double meaning, both a trick of human warfare and a sign of divine or cosmic justice. 1. Vibe, nature's wrath and human fear. Forests have always carried a sense of mystery, awe, and fear. To humans, they represent both life and danger, places of shelter but also of lurking shadows. In Macbeth, Birnam Wood does not simply symbolize soldiers carrying branches, it becomes a force of nature itself, rising to reclaim justice. For Shakespeare's audience, the idea of a moving forest would stir deep anxieties. Nature was seen as unpredictable, a realm of storms, plagues, and signs from the heavens. If a forest could uproot itself and march toward a castle, then no king, no matter how powerful, could stand against it. This reflects a timeless theme. Human beings often believe they can dominate nature, but nature always has the final word. Whether through famine, disease, or even forests that walk, the natural world reminds us of our limits. The disguised forest is, therefore, not only a prophecy fulfilled, but also a terrifying reminder that the world beyond human control can deliver justice when human laws fail. 1.5. Forests as symbols in myths and literature. Across cultures, forests are more than just landscapes. They are living symbols. In myths, legends, and fairy tales, forests often serve as thresholds, mysterious places where heroes are tested, where monsters dwell, and where transformation begins. In Norse mythology, the great world tree Yggdrasil connects realms of gods, humans, and the dead. In European folk tales, dense forests conceal both danger and magic, teaching lessons about courage, temptation, and survival. Even in modern stories, forests remain spaces of the unknown, places where ordinary rules no longer apply. Shakespeare drew upon this ancient symbolism. Birnam Wood was not just camouflage for soldiers. It was destiny disguised as nature. The forest became an omen, a sign that Macbeth's time was over, and that no mortal hand but the force of fate would bring him down. By making a forest move, Shakespeare blurred the line between natural and supernatural, reminding audiences that even the most ordinary landscapes could carry extraordinary meaning. 1.5. Real-world inspirations behind the wandering forest. While Shakespeare's moving forest feels like pure fantasy, it actually draws inspiration from real-world strategies and natural imagery. In medieval warfare, armies often used clever tricks to disguise their numbers. One effective method was cutting down branches and carrying them as cover. From a distance, it looked like an entire forest advancing, striking fear into enemies who thought nature itself was turning against them. This tactic gave Shakespeare the perfect way to fulfill the witch's prophecy without breaking the rules of reality. But beyond military strategy, the image of a wandering forest reflects a deeper truth. Nature has always been a force of transformation. Forests grow, spread, reclaim ruins, and erase the traces of civilizations. What was once a battlefield can, in time, become a woodland. In this sense, Birnam Wood's march on Dunsinane symbolized not only Macbeth's fall, but the power of nature to outlast human ambition. The prophecy wasn't about magic alone. It was about inevitability. Just as no tyrant can escape time, no fortress can withstand the slow, unstoppable advance of the natural world. Wifi. The Enigma of Birnam Wood teaches us that even the strongest rulers cannot escape fate. Macbeth, once a loyal and noble warrior, was undone not only by ambition but also by his belief in a prophecy he misunderstood. The witches never lied. They simply spoke in riddles. Birnam Wood did come to Dunsinane, but in the hands of soldiers, not by supernatural means. This moment in Macbeth shows how illusions can shape reality. Macbeth's overconfidence blinded him to the truth until it was too late. The forest, a symbol of life, growth, and inevitability, became the harbinger of his death. Shakespeare's wandering forest reminds us of something timeless. Power may rise and fall, but nature always prevails. No wall, no kingdom, no king can resist its quiet, unstoppable advance. And so, the unusual forest in disguise is more than just a dramatic twist. It is a warning, a prophecy, and a mirror of human destiny.